Good. So, look,
Technology.
welcome everybody. I think we're live now. So, let's do a quick introduction. If anybody's there listening, it's hard for me to know. My name's Guy, and I am a violinist in the LCO. Who else would like to introduce themselves? Maybe Rach. Go on.
Hello, I'm Racheal, and I play the cello with the LCO.
James is next on my screen. So.
I'm a bass, and I sang the bass solos in the Pulcinella for the LCO.
And finally,
hello, I'm Ross, and I play trumpet in the LCO.
Nice, good to see you all. Actually, look, I had a little question. James, how did you come to end up doing that gig? Because I had no. Generally, obviously, we all play together really regularly, but how does it work when?
Well, I wasn't actually down to do that gig originally, but I think it was Jonathan Lamar who was down to sing it originally, and I think he had some illness and his family had to fly back to New Zealand, and because of COVID, my sort of last 6 months of work was cancelled. But I basically took on all of Johnny's work instead, which a lot of it ended up actually happening. So it was a sort of weird combination of circumstances. But I actually recorded it about 6 months before we did as well for the Bebop in Scotland. So it was just one of those lucky coincidences.
That's cool. Yeah, it's probably not. I mean, it's probably not done that often, is it?
No. And there's been quite a few of them in the last 12 months. So it's been nice to sing it a few times.
Nice. Because we quite often do the other version, the orchestral suite version.
Yeah, the suite. Yeah, but it's really beautiful. I think with the voices and the two Pergolesi arias and everything. I think it's a really, really nice piece.
Yeah, it's great.
Mm.
Nice. So
They're not by Pergolesi, though, are they? Is that a spoiler?
Mega spoiler.
That's the spoiler. Stravinsky stole the tunes. That's the.
I think your spoiler went out to everyone who was on Facebook Live, but we're now officially live on all platforms. So those people joining us on YouTube won't have received that spoiler yet. Ross, you can spoil it later. Yeah, why don't we just go around one more time and just introduce ourselves all again? So my name's Guy, and I'm a violinist in the LCO.
My name's Racheal. I'm a cellist in the LCO.
My name's James, and I'm the bass soloist for the Pulcinella for the LCO.
And my name's Ross, and I'm the trumpet player for the LCO. Or one of them, I should say. Not
Like
the.
the trumpet player. Come on.
The trumpeter, Ross.
That's hubris. Yeah.
Are you going to get any trumpeters logging on to chat to you? Have you called in the cabal?
I sincerely hope not. I'm kidding. It'd be a pleasure to talk to them all.
Yeah, if I recognise any trumpeters' names, I'll definitely give their questions too. Hey, look, we've got our first question. So this is from Barbara. How different is it for your particular instruments to play a ballet in an orchestra rather than a symphony? Hey, look, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Racheal, what do you reckon? Sorry, man.
You're going to direct that to someone. Like, God, don't ask me that. Is there any difference? I don't know that there is a difference. Is there? I didn't.
You'd be playing in the pit, I suppose, wouldn't you? As opposed to.
Yes. That's a very good point, and I actually much prefer playing in a pit. That's where I'm happiest.
Yeah.
Because of my mining background. No, I'm kidding. Just because I spend a lot of time. Well, I did pre-pandemic in the West End, and I just really like the energy of being in a pit band. And no one can see you.
Yes.
But other than that, no, I did. Yeah.
I suppose in this instance, there isn't really too much of a difference because we were just in the same formation as we would have been to play a symphony, weren't we? So yeah, much the same, especially with a fairly small group.
Well, Chris didn't make us stand up for this. That's what happens in a symphony quite often, is that everybody has to stand up in the LCO. Not me as a cellist, but luckily.
That's a good point. That's
a very special LCO thing, though, isn't it?
It really is.
I guess one difference. I mean, if we were playing in a pit, the one thing which is quite striking when you're playing a lot away is you've got dancers hitting the floor directly above your head, and of course they might take off in time with a particular beat of the music. They don't necessarily land in time with the same beat. So it can be like playing in a kind of great big hailstorm. So it's a bit peculiar, isn't it, playing in a ballet orchestra? But in this setting, and I guess the difference between ballet music is that we have to do it in exactly the right tempo for the dancers as well. So when you're playing a ballet score without dancers, you can do it whatever speed the conductor wants to do it at. But when you're accompanying dancers, you are accompanying. So that's a few differences, I guess.
They can be really very sensitive to the changes in speed, can't they? Perhaps more than anyone else, really. Obviously, like instrumental soloists can probably adapt within a range, and similar with singers, but the dancers, it's really absolutely like to the metronome mark. They notice the difference.
Could you demonstrate for us, Kai?
I bet you could.
It's not the right. This conversation is not at the right speed for me to dance. Hey, look, we've got another one. So, Martin, there have been a few of these online concerts by now. Are you getting used to the filming and recording process? How does it compare to a normal concert? Yeah, I've done a few of these with LCO. Racheal, you've done a few as well, have you? How many have you done with LCO, Ross? Have you?
I've done, well, Pulcinella was the first one, and it was actually the first time I played with an orchestra after 14 months off.
Gosh.
So I was just glad I could sort of still do it. Notice the sort of. And yeah, I did the 100th anniversary celebration one as well. And yeah, it's a very pleasant atmosphere, I think. It's quite cordial. What struck me first of all was how hot the lights were for the TV lights, because obviously we need to be lit up. And that took a bit of getting used to. But other than that, I think it was, I mean, we've all done this sort of thing before on TV and filming and that sort of thing. I think the greatest difference, obviously, we have the spacing now. So I think it's a couple of meters between the wind and brass. So that took a little bit of getting used to, but actually the nature of Pulcinella is it's very soloistic. So you've got two horns, one trumpet, one trombone. They're all kind of doing their own things. So I guess you didn't really have to worry too much about blending within a section. But obviously for string players, that's quite different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a big deal for us to be that much further apart, isn't it? I guess we have to get used to that. One of the earlier ones, I can't remember, were you doing that, Racheal? Did you do the Metamorphosin?
That was really tough. That was quite tough.
Yeah, I didn't end up playing in that piece in that program, but I know.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. No, that was quite difficult. Just because the acoustic in St John Smith Square is quite boomy anyway. And then if you're trying to kind of blend intonation-wise and sort of sound-wise with other string players that are really far apart, it does present a bit of a challenge. And also, I guess it's different as well because you don't have the LCO. There's something about an LCO concert because I think the way Chris kind of conducts the orchestra, it does feel quite like electric, and you never know what's going to happen. I mean that in a complimentary way. And obviously, you lose that kind of instant thing when we're sort of being filmed and repeating things. Can you hear something? Is that? Can you hear a strange little gremlin? Is that your kitten, Guy?
I can't see her. You'd notice her. She'd make herself known if she was
okay.
There.
Yeah, so I guess that's the atmosphere thing is different. But actually, to be honest, when we did Metamorphosin, that was the first kind of classical thing that I'd done after the pandemic, and I was just basically trying not to blub all the way through it. It was just so kind of emotional to be like in a frock, playing proper notes with colleagues, and even if it was, with marks and tests and all the rest of it, it was just, I just felt incredibly lucky to be there at all in any way. And it's been really nice that we've had these going on. It's been it's been really, really, I think we've all really appreciated it.
And brilliant, wasn't it? Actually, you know what? When we were just off air, James mentioned that he'd also recorded the Stravinsky with a different orchestra not that long before. So was there any difference in the way that the two projects were kind of carried out?
When we did it was for BBC Scottish actually, and the hall they have a big hall there anyway. So the orchestra were very, very, very spaced, and not just in sections, everybody. So it was a very different feel, because I mean, everybody was sort of 3 meters apart, and we had the famous COVID monitor with a 2 meter ruler was on guard, making sure that nobody got within two meters or so. But I mean, it was different acoustic, not as boomy as St John's, much drier. So in some ways, it might have been slightly easier with the distancing there. But yeah, it's been a crazy time for us all, though, hasn't it? I mean, no music, and I managed to get a few concerts in the break at Christmas, and I went to Ireland actually, bizarrely, and we should have been doing the Abduction from the Seraglio on stage, and they just turned that into a concert rather than the opera, and we did some messiahs out there. But it was it was amazing just to come back and hear the orchestra again and make some collaborative music together after all that time. I mean, you just can't imagine it. I mean, first time in history, isn't it? Well, we've not been able to do that for so long. It's crazy. So it's so nice that things are now coming back. Actually,
I think this is possibly also from Martin, is asking whether the way you sing is affected at all by the fact that you are being filmed, if you change your approach in that.
Yeah, I think it depends on the circumstances, because I think the way things have happened with COVID, and this was actually the same when I was at the National Concert Hall in Dublin as well. In Dublin, they'd actually kitted out the entire hall with these tiny cameras across all of the balconies, so you didn't even know you were being filmed. And then when you walked off stage, they had a huge TV set up there, and they were mixing it all live. But I think the idea was that they wanted to capture us in concert rather than something being filmed and directed, which is a bit more specific in terms of shots and cameras and where you're looking and the way they're taking the film. But I think most of the things they've tried to capture us more naturally, which I think has been quite nice, actually, rather than it being directed.
That's great. Yeah, I've been involved in a few different ones, actually. Yeah, with a similar kind of breadth of styles. Yeah, so somewhere I was involved in a series of concerts where we actually just played the concert through once, and that was what was put out. A little bit more like real life, but generally when things are recorded, we've become used to a certain level of production perfection, haven't we? And so it's hard to put that to one side because you are doing a recording. I was thinking that in the normal order of things, if a concert was going to be televised or recorded or broadcast on radio or anything like that, it would be a notably stressful experience. Like you would think about it in advance of that, and you would prepare accordingly, and everything would be on a knife edge on the actual day. But that's almost become the norm. Every single thing you do gets recorded or videoed, and
I suppose the difference with this recording is we did it a few times, and what I think was really, really good was that that it was like performing it every time we did it. It had that kind of electricity and energy. Yeah, and I think that's hopefully will come over in the concert this evening.
Absolutely. Hey, look, we have another question, and the four of us were discussing beforehand that this might be a little bit of a tricky one for us to answer, or anything regarding the other piece in the program, which is Horseplay, because actually none of the four of us were involved in that performance of it. So Gary Lightfoot has asked, are there any particular challenges about that piece, and what do we think of Erilyn, the composer in particular? Has anyone had any experience of working with Erilyn?
Yeah, I have. I did something fairly recently. Well, I say that, but obviously it was pre-pandemic, but I've forgotten the name of the piece, chaps. It was Chi-Chi played. It was a bass concerto, bass and piano, and it was really funky and cool, and just it was we really enjoyed it. So I mean, if that's anything to go by, thumbs up.
Nice.
Yeah.
I heard they really enjoyed recording it, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
They had a of time.
That's what they've said. Yeah, absolutely.
Reports were good.
No, I'm definitely looking forward to hearing it. I've never actually played any of her music, but what I have read or seen short interviews with her, it sounds like she's draws on a hugely kind of eclectic and sort of vast set of influences. So the sort of genre and style is very difficult to define. It's inspired by so many different pieces of music which have kind of inspired her over the years. So yeah, looking forward to hearing it. We're a little bit short on questions at the moment, so we can.
Where's your kitten, Guy?
Quick,
yeah. So I sort of promised, well, no, not promised, but mentioned that possible distraction, and a little bit dry on conversation, was that my 10-week-old kitten might make a guest appearance, but right now she's being bizarrely well behaved. She's very naughty,
okay.
but
There's another question.
hey, we're all right. We're saved.
We're saved for James. Go, James.
Yeah, go on, James. So, have you sung with Lucy Crow and Toby Spencer before?
I've not sung with Lucy before, although I know Lucy, but that was the first time we worked together. But I've sung with Toby quite a few times. We've done Messiahs before. We were in Billy Budd together at Glyndebourne a few years ago. So I know, and we did, I think, Magic Flute at the Opera House a few years ago as well. So yeah, I've sung with Toby quite a bit.
Nice. And did you do any? Because obviously, as far as we were aware, you all three rocked up individually and then just off you went. Whereas, had you had any pre-rehearsal conversations or no?
No,
Great.
no. So we just came in and did it, yeah.
Nice.
Which is often the way with these things, you know. It's quite, I suppose, funny being the singers, because often we come in. It's very rare we have piano rehearsal. Sometimes we might have a piano rehearsal, and then it's just in with the orchestra and do it. So it's a bit different to you guys who are all rehearsing away for a long time before we get there.
I guess that's quite different to what it's like if you're preparing for an opera, isn't it?
Completely.
Which is sort of like the total opposite.
Yeah, well, the orchestra are actually coming in on relatively little rehearsal, and we've been living with a production for 6 weeks or so. You know, so it's a very different. So the singers have to do that when we do concert performances, and we come in with the orchestra on very little time, and then the orchestra have to do that on opera. So what goes around comes around.
And then they've got a question actually for you on that very same topic. Do you have a preference for opera or concerts based on?
I couldn't live without either. I think they both feed each other. I love opera. There's something really nice about being able to inhabit a piece and grow an interpretation over 6 weeks with a conductor and a director. But by the same token, often in opera, you'll always bring an interpretation, but it's very much guided by the conductor and the director. Whereas in concert performances, because often we have a lot less rehearsal as singers, you can sort of bring more of your interpretation. You're not having to negotiate your interpretation necessarily in the same way that you would do in the opera. I mean, as long as you agree with the conductor. But yeah, so I enjoy both of them a lot.
James, can I ask you a question? What's it like when you've got the halfway house, you're doing a semi-stage production? Is that a bit strange?
It annoys me, the semi-stage production thing, because what it tends to mean is you get paid for a concert performance and you have no rehearsal and you have no time, but they expect you to come up with something like you would do off the back of a 3 or 6 week rehearsal process. So if it's a piece everybody knows really well, they can be very exciting. If it's a piece where half of the cast haven't done it before or whatever, they can be very, very stressful because you don't have that time to bed the piece in. And obviously to do that sort of thing from memory on such little rehearsal is often really quite tricky. So it depends. As I say, I enjoy doing it with pieces I know really well, but less so with roles I haven't done on stage before or roles I haven't done in concert a lot.
Yeah. Mostly, do you end up sort of having to basically improvise the
Very often. In fact, the worst sort of those performances are literally when there's no director at all. So you arrive and you're expected to come up with a semi-stage performance with basically no direction. Maybe the conductor will give you some entrances and exits, maybe, but it's basically left to the singers. And it's sort of, you know, when you've only got a limited amount of rehearsal time to actually rehearse the music, often to put all of that extra complexity in there can be difficult. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, if people from the audience, I mean, how do you guys feel about it? I mean, is it more exciting for you guys to have us doing a semi-stage performance without the score? I mean, because I often quite like coming back to a concert performance with the score because it allows us to focus on the music and often to do things that we might not be able to do on the stage. You know, we get a level of intimacy with the score that's quite different to when we're on the stage. So yeah.
I play quite a lot of baroque opera, so yeah, and again, there's a big mix of. I work for some opera companies, so I'm involved in full stage performances. But then there's a lot of those where new pieces are being kind of unearthed from archives and that kind of thing. So we do a lot of concert performances. The one thing I always find slightly ridiculous in that is the insistence on on singing all of the recitative throughout things when there's no actual drama taking place. And especially if the singers haven't managed to learn it all that well, and sort of just singing the dramatic sort of parts of the piece without really, half the people in the audience won't understand what's going on, and it doesn't really have any great musical content to it either. So
well, of course, I always think that with recitative that you have to rehearse it. You can't improvise. A recitative should sound improvised, but that comes from a huge amount of rehearsal. And again, when you're thrown in on the day, especially particularly in baroque operas, Handel operas, where the recitatives are extensive, very difficult to throw that together on the day when you're also rehearsing all of the symphonic music from the piece as well. So I agree. I mean, although, the recitative can be, when it's done well, very, very exciting. And again, if you've got singers there that know the roles really well, they'll probably be able to make a much better job of those recitatives than singers maybe coming into that opera for the first time. So again, if you're going to put it together so quickly, you need the right people to really make an impact on limited rehearsal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This looks like one for Racheal.
Oh gosh.
Ellie Hughes says, what are you most looking forward to about getting audiences back? Have you done any concerts with audiences yet in the last couple of weeks? Or
not in the last couple of weeks? I did. A strange situation arose at Christmas where I found myself doing like a sort of 4 days of a show in Chichester Festival Theatre with an audience, and it was Christmas carols. And people were singing behind masks, like dotted all over the festival theatre, but it still felt. I was actually surprised because, I was surprised at that sort of the live performance adrenaline thing that you get. But obviously, when you're doing something that's repeated, and if it goes wrong, it's not great, but you can do it again. You don't have that same kind of sense of what's the word? Panic? No, not panic. But just the kind of the adrenaline. I was really surprised at how exhausting 2 shows a day was, but also it was just so nice to kind of feel some reaction to what you're doing, because it's this thing of playing in a vacuum. It's just mentally isn't great, I don't think, for people who are performers for a living, and it's like a muscle that doesn't get worked, and so I'm just really looking forward to having that atmosphere back, really. And someone's going to rustle a Werther's original in a quiet bit. Who is it going to? There's all of that, all of the kind of joy of having live audiences, and also things going wrong. I love it when something goes wrong, and just the kind of electric atmosphere that you get. It's really, really. I think it is fairly hard to recreate that when you're doing something 3 times over in a with cameras doing different angles and stuff. So yeah, there's loads to look forward to.
Definitely that kind of elation when you get to the end of a very dramatic symphony or something. And well, I suppose, for example, in one of the concerts that's already been broadcast on the LCO, the Elgar Introduction and Allegro, and we got to the end of that, and it was a really kind of exciting moment and huge adrenaline rush, and then silence, and then cameras reset, and then you just got to play it again, and it doesn't really compare, does it, to the concert experience? Hey, and on that subject, has anyone watched many online concerts? Ross, have you watched many?
Loads, yeah, absolutely loads, and it's been really nice to watch, actually, to catch up on lots of stuff which is out there, which has been out there for years, and YouTube's got obviously thousands of things on it, good and bad, but I've caught up with quite a lot of few things. I'm trying to think what I've watched recently. Håkan Hardenberger, famous Swedish trumpet soloist, has put quite a lot of content up on YouTube, which I'd encourage all you trumpet lovers to watch out there, if there are any. That's been really inspiring, and I think actually it's been really inspiring. I think that's just listening to people doing things, and being really creative in their own homes, and it's certainly encouraged me to keep practicing over the 14 months where I haven't had very much to do, and it could have easily got quite out of hand Well, more so than it did. But I think we're all driven by, you know, performing and you know, being involved in music making as a collective experience. And I think when you're at home, it's really, really hard to keep motivated, to keep practicing. So certainly listening to great performers and fantastic performances kept me going.
Absolutely.
I've really
Sorry, go on, James.
I was just going to say, I've really enjoyed it as well. I've obviously done a lot of teaching over the last 12 months and watching singers in the conservatoires doing opera scenes in their bedroom on Zoom, you know, which happened in the first lockdown. And just to see, you know, them doing whatever they could to try and do some collaborative music making together with latency, with delay, with stage management, hands appearing out of green screens and all sorts. It's been really fun, but you know, it's great to see that spirit of everybody trying to keep going no matter what they've tried to make music. Because I mean, I would have hated to have been at music college during this time and not had face-to-face lessons and played in ensembles. It must be just horrendous for them, but they've really tried their best to do whatever they can to keep it together.
That's tough, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, on the same kind of subject of online concerts, and you know, have you watched many of them? Do you guys tend to watch the concerts that you're involved in?
These ones I have. These ones I have, definitely, because I'm really proud of playing with the LCO. I just really like, and I just love how kind of vibrant it all is, and how as a string player, especially, the sections are small, and we are encouraged to kind of project as chamber musicians and not as kind of symphony orchestra players in a way. Like we're all kind of very, very sort of energetic and committed. So I have watched these ones actually. And also it's just because because of what's happened with the pandemic, it's just felt more sort of precious to do it. And it's actually really nice that that we'll have some longevity. So it's not a concert that's just thin and gone. It's there. So yeah, I have watched these ones in a sort of narcissistic.
It's definitely true what you say though of these ones, because they've been produced so nicely, haven't they?
They have. They look so nice.
They look brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, and they sound good as well.
Yeah.
So
I'm just going to do a quick plug for something that actually I am also really I would love to win some of the prizes for, which is the LCO raffle, because the top prize is these I don't know what the make is, but these amazing £2,500 speakers. But there's also an amazing Yamaha portable keyboard that's available as one of the other prizes. Oh, apparently I've just been told the speakers are Q acoustic, but the keyboard is one of the best portable pianos with proper action, basically like a stage piano that you can get. And I really would love to. Basically, I'm going to need to buy one myself.
Entered the raffle. Have you entered it?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to enter the raffle.
Yeah.
I would have to declare an interest, wouldn't I?
Does the piano play itself? If so, I might enter it.
Yeah. I think, yeah, so there are loads of other prizes as well, which I think are kind of a lot of food and wine, various hampers. It's worth checking it out, and it all goes towards the LCO. So we've got one more question. Let's see. How many online performances do you think you've each done since the beginning of the first lockdown? Okay, yeah, big one. Look, I'd like to start by saying that I think I'm actually involved in 2 performances tonight.
All right, fancy pants.
Yeah. so I'm going to be playing this concert at 7:30, and simultaneously I'm also playing in a different concert.
Wow.
So that's one of the amazing
many benefits
achievements that the pandemic has allowed me to manage. Anyone else got a number of how many concerts they think they've?
Well, I saw this question come up and I did the mental arithmetic, and I think 12, which is, it's not loads.
Decent.
It's decent. I did. I was in the kind of streamed version of Glastonbury that went out last week. I think it's going out this weekend on the BBC actually. So they had all the acts kind of on different days in the stone circle with no shelter. So it was all very weather dependent, you can imagine.
Yeah. How was the weather?
Not been clement. Well, we got very lucky, but we were the only acts that were lucky. Everyone else just spent a lot of time hiding from the rain, which obviously not just the instruments is a problem, but all the electrical cabling and all of that kind of, it was a logistical nightmare. And also, huge film crews and drone cameras and weather, and everyone just became obsessed with the weather. But yeah, it was fun.
You live down that way, don't you, Ross?
Yeah, I'm in Bristol. Yeah, and I think in Wales, which usually gets absolutely chock-a-block of cars and traffic and people smelling of various things around that time of year. But sadly, not this year.
Yeah, it was very strange because I've done it before, and obviously Glastonbury with no punters and no tents and it was quite eerie. It was beautiful and lovely and delightful to be. Still had lovely catering, most important bit. But yeah, it was very, what's the word? Oh no, not serene. The other one, surreal. Oh gosh, guys, sorry, it's been a very long day. Got 2 children. This is what happens to your brain.
Serene's that malt life, isn't it? Serene.
Sorry, they're all the same. Yeah, you're right. Nearly the same.
James, what about you? Have you how many concerts?
I reckon probably slightly less than Racheal. I reckon around 10 since the first lockdown, probably. Yeah.
Still quite a lot compared to normal, isn't it?
I mean, friends of mine have had none, so it was just. Yeah. I was lucky that I had things planned in that little gap that we had at Christmas time. So I sort of flew to Ireland where. I mean, it's been interesting with the whole lockdown thing about how different companies have actually enforced the guidance. Because, I mean, at that time in England, everything shut down. And then I flew to Ireland. I thought I was going to have to quarantine for 2 weeks before I got there. Turned out I didn't. They changed the guidance. I went there. We went straight into rehearsals. They were, we didn't have audiences, but we did the opera as a concert performance. We did Messiah as concert performances with the orchestra distanced. We managed to get it done when in the UK, most companies, apart from maybe 2 orchestras, had completely shut down. So that was very lucky, I think. And obviously now things are starting to open up a bit more. I mean, I'm in rehearsals at the moment for a Midsummer Night's Dream at the Grange Opera in Hampshire. So we open in a couple of weeks. So that's going to be amazing. We're going to have I think we're going to have a small audience of maybe 400 or 300 people in there, hopefully. So that's going to be amazing to do some live opera after all this time. But yeah.
I think I'm doing my first concert to an audience tomorrow, actually. First, since however long ago.
Yeah.
It's going to be quite a small audience. I think it's part of this Baroque festival in Beverley near Hyde.
Oh, beautiful. It's beautiful in Beverley.
Yeah, so I'm going out there tomorrow. But I think they've told us that they can only have 30 people in the audience. So hence, in order to actually try and allow enough people to hear it and see it, it's also going to be filmed and broadcast. So even though it's still a live audience, it still feels like one of these recorded ones with that the extra stressful element of that.
I mean, Les Miserables opened.
Of course,
yeah. 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago it opened with they've got a orchestra on stage and
they've all been living in bubbles, haven't they?
Yes.
So that they don't have to distance on stage.
Yeah,
so I know, which is interesting again.
Every day, I think, and yeah.
Hey, look, so we've got a couple of questions, and one I'm going to ask first because it's to the audience in a way. So I'll ask that, and they can have a chance to reply, and then I can ask one to you, like whilst people are coming back to us. So Gary Lightfoot asks, I plug my laptop into my wonderful hi-fi, but do you think most people on the online audience would listen just through their laptop speakers? So let's get a little bit of a survey going. Are people using dedicated speakers, or are they just using their laptop speakers? And whilst people are responding to that, we've got a question from Betty who's listening on the website. What is your favourite Stravinsky piece? I need to have a bit of a think about that. So someone else want to take the lead? Ross?
I will. Pulcinella. Obviously. It is actually. It's definitely on my Desert Island discs, and there's an amazing recording I used to listen to with the LSO conducted by somebody famous, and it's the original version, and I can't remember who's singing on that. It's a bardo in the LSO, and I can't remember who's singing on it, but it's absolutely wonderful, and it's got all the sort of. I mean, I play the natural trumpet as well, which is the baroque trumpet, which doesn't have valves in, and obviously this music was based. This piece was based on baroque. Various baroque compositions, which were meant to be by Pergolesi. They thought it by Pergolesi, but some of them weren't by Pergolesi. But it's got that kind of baroque spirit. It's an incredibly charming, fun piece to play, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. And of course, I suppose it's quite different to the Rite of Spring, which is probably one of my other favourite pieces by Stravinsky, which came a few years before. And they're kind of at the two different ends of the spectrum, really, aren't they? But my vote would be Pulcinella.
Okay, mine would be Rite of Spring, but I think maybe, so I've got my dad and my stepdad are both professional bassoonists. So I've heard that being practiced and cursed at, that opening solo, my entire life. So it's probably like kind of, childhood reaction, but because it's mentioned all the time in our house, but it is so exciting and difficult and dramatic. But then again, I do like the Firebird suite also.
That's my favourite.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's a belter, isn't it?
Yeah.
Horn solo just before the end. Yeah, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
And for me, it's Rite of Spring, and it's because I led it in my youth orchestra, my county youth orchestra, when I was 16 or something, and it was just the first time I'd been exposed to anything like that, with anything like that kind of rhythmic complexity, and it's just such a formative experience. We went on tour to the Czech Republic and played it in various places there, and it just because I spent, obviously it's quite an ask for a youth orchestra to learn a piece like that, so we put months and months of work into it. And I remember trying sort of kind of helping to direct the violin sectionals, and just really bang our heads against the wall trying to make sure we were all playing the right rhythms and all this very complicated music. And it was just when you learn something like that young and go through that experience to learn it, it just really sticks with you forever, doesn't it? Cool. So a couple of responses to the little survey, the audience survey. We've got a couple of laptops. So John Waite's laptop. Eddie Hughes goes for headphones. Sensible decision. Can be a bit bright sometimes on the headphones, but you definitely get clear sound. And what's this? Earl says, I plug my laptop into a good speaker with a giant subwoofer attached. The sound you produce is amazing, to say the least. Hey, great. That's nice. You're going to get a lot of bass through that, aren't you, to do justice?
The trombone number will be good.
Yeah.
That's a great moment, isn't it? That trombone number. I remember learning about that at school. Trombone and bass, we must say.
And double bass, yes.
Is there a double bass in it? Sorry, I didn't notice.
Don't tell Stacey that.
Hey, nice. Coming towards the end of the time, aren't we? Time for the concert to start pretty soon. Has anyone else? Have you guys got any questions for each other or thoughts that we might have missed out?
Well, it must have been amazing to be at the first performance of the Pulcinella, because obviously Picasso designed all of the sets and the costumes. Yeah. So it must have been quite the event with Diaghilev and the ballet and Picasso's costumes and sets. And
it's awesome, isn't it? It's kind of an all-star cast.
Yeah. And I suppose a bit like Das Lied von der Erde, the singers, they're not directly part of the action, obviously, because it's a ballet. So actually we've been in the pit as well, which is quite unusual, I suppose. And we're sort of creating these little tableaus rather than it being a solo about the action of the ballet. So it's quite an interesting sort of way to do it.
Quite unusual, actually, isn't it, to have singers directly, singers involved in a ballet like
that. I mean, maybe I say Mahler, the Das Lied von der Erde is often done that way, but there's not many pieces where the singers are sort of, within the pit, contributing in the same way that the orchestra are, and what's going on stage is something quite different. So
so in a kind of staged performance of this Pulcinella ballet, is that where you
often the singers are just in the pit, so and the ballet, because it's not narrative, we're not singing narrative arias about what's happening. They're sort of like reflections of mood on these characters, like the Commedia dell'arte archetypal characters, so it's sort of like little reflections rather than being sort of dialogue. So it's quite interesting.
Man, that'd be loud.
Yeah.
You guys in the pit.
Isn't it quite a crazy storyline, Pulcinella? I'm sure there are some wonderful program notes.
Yeah.
There's also, we need to say that there's one of the students from Queen Mary University, London, who we're closely associated with, has written an original narration to go alongside the piece explaining the ballet, which is great. So I'm looking forward to hearing that, because I've no idea what's going on.
Is that who's actually giving the narration? Is that Erilyn? Yeah, great. It is Erilyn who's narrating it. Well, that's cool. Nice to have her involved in more than one way then.
Yeah, and it's Freya Johnson who wrote the narration.
Nice. Well, I look forward to hearing that.
Want me to give you a very quick précis of the story?
Yeah.
Go on then.
So all the local young girls are in love with Pulcinella, but all of the young men to whom they are betrothed are mad with jealousy and plot to kill him. Just when they think they're at the point of success, they borrow costumes resembling that of Pulcinella and present themselves to their sweethearts in disguise. But Pulcinella, a cunning fellow, had arranged to change places with Forbo, his double, who made a pretense of succumbing to the blows of Pulcinella's enemies. The real Pulcinella now disguises himself as a magician and imitates his double. At the very moment when the four young men think they have got rid of their rival, come to claim their sweethearts, Pulcinella appears and arranges marriages for them all. He himself weds Pimpinella, receiving the blessing of Forbo, who in turn assumes the magician's guise. So it's quite convoluted.
Sounds like the LCO on tour.
Yeah, absolutely. As all those commedia operas are, trying to explain Marriage of Figaro in 2 minutes.
Well, that was great. That was a brilliant placement. I'd love it if you just that was off the top of your head.
Yeah. Well, you've got to get your head around these pieces because they're not easy plots. So, I mean, this is less so because, as I said, the arias aren't. It's not narrative action, but it's it's nice to sort of get the idea of what the arias are about because they are quite abstract.
Yeah. So, what the text in your aria? What is it about?
He's talking about sort of announcing death, and he's the sort of magician figure, or that's what it sort of implies. So it's the sort of like all the horns and the woodwind. It's all about death arriving. So again, it's not necessarily linked to the actual the sort of action of the ballet, but it's a sort of reflection on the story. So yeah, or at least the first aria is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the second one, has that got a kind of direct?
No, that's even less so. Again, it's a sort of fanfare, presumably for the wedding. So that's where you get the lovely horn solos. The F major one is sort of, it's announcing. But again, it's quite funny because I say it's not necessarily direct narration on what's going on stage. So, the same with the Setumami. The arias are actually quite interesting because everybody learns the 24 Italian songs and arias when they're at college, which is a sort of yellow Sherma book. And the arias from this piece, every mezzo would learn Setumami as one of their first arias. So the tunes that we all know because everybody tends to learn them early on in undergrad. So it's quite nice to hear them orchestrated by Stravinsky.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, nice to actually sing them with the full orchestra, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, look, we've got a couple of minutes left, so I'll just try and go through everything that we're getting in the comments. Chris on the website likes Rachel's background.
Thank you very much, Chris. That is a £6 mandala tablecloth up there to make me appear spiritual. So I hope that's worked.
And I'm just trying to slightly translate what John Waits has said here. Went to a riot at Salzburg Festival.
All right.
Can that be right? Michael Rose came on stage to say, the sooner we shut up, the sooner we could get to the bar.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, John.
Is that a hint?
It's probably makes quite a lot of sense in that we're probably about to shut up because the concert is about to begin. So, thanks, you guys. Been really nice to see you and catch up and hear about your thoughts on all of that. Look forward to seeing you IRL in real life and actually playing concerts to some young people soon.
Absolutely.
Nice.
See you soon.
See you.
Bye.